Hi, welcome back to Love in the Morning. This is a podcast that talks about grief, has those uncomfortable conversations that I love to have, that I love to share with you. I love to learn more, and I love to share what I'm learning. So, this week, I want to talk a little bit about the experience I had this past weekend. I went to Oyosoos BC with my sister. We drove from Alberta just outside of Edmonton, all the way to Oyosoos. And the drive was beautiful. While we were away, the weather turned very horrible in our area. We missed it. It was beautiful and sunny and just breathtaking where we were. And on our drive back, the weather was great. We missed it. So that was a blessing. Anyway, we went to a retreat called Build Your Brave. I had been to that retreat the year before. I went on my own, and it was one of those things that I hadn't done since before John died. And actually, probably quite a while before John died. I used to go and visit my sister, uh, and but he always booked my flights. He took me to the airport. He did all the things, and I would go on my own. Well, this was the first time since he died that I actually booked my own flight, booked the car, flew um, to Penticton and got my rental car and drove to Soyuz on my own. And I remember thinking how incredibly brave I was and what a big girl. Even though I had done that for myself, because when I did any kind of traveling for work, I did all my own bookings. So, what happens a lot of times to us when we lose a partner to death is we almost forget the things we know how to do. Um, we feel very limited in decision making, and everything just seems that much harder. And this was a couple of years after John had died. I am in year 3 now, and you know, I felt like when I went into that room that maybe I shouldn't be there because I had put all these shoulds on myself and I need to be. I, I never have ever felt like I was an entrepreneur, although I've um, worked on and had a business with my daughter that was very successful. And then my business in grief education has been successful. I keep it small and that's the way I want it. But that in that way, I felt like I was less than, that I didn't have the eye of the tiger. Well, this conference or retreat is not about that. It's about actually building yourself into who you are, who you're supposed to be, shedding all the shoulds and embracing who we are in this moment without judgment. So it's right up my alley because I'm in my unfiltered era, which is something that is going to grow. I've even included an unfiltered era coaching program that I do that started organically working with widows, and where these women have walked through and walked with me in other programs and are now at the point where, who am I in all of this now? I've lost myself along the way. I can't go back to who I was before. And it's true, you'll never be the person you were before the loss because you hadn't experienced it. And now you have, and it becomes a part of you. So I decided after the really positive experience I had last year that I was going to go back. And I wanted to be a sponsor. And I did. I sponsored the event. I was one of 5 sponsors and proudly a sponsor. And then I had a table and I invited my sister and she sold paintings. So she stepped into building her brave. It was her first time. And it can be, without intention, it can be actually quite intimidating to grievers. But we found a sisterhood within those walls. There are people who have experienced many different forms of loss. I talked to so many different women who had lost partners, women who had lost parents, women who had lost their beloved fur babies. And I got to sit with them and hear their stories and feel a connection like you don't get in many rooms. There was no filtering. And I got to be on a panel with 4 other women on Friday night to share our stories. And each one had a different story. Each one had a story of loss unique to their experience. Some were betrayals, ending marriages, abusive relationships, painful experiences, trauma. And a few of us had experienced the loss of a partner. And each person shared their story. And I shared mine. I gave everyone in the room a copy of my book, The Hardest, Not the Worst Year. Right. A Widow's Journey. And isn't this wonderful? There. Oh, it's so hard to do this. I'm trying to show my book. The Hardest, Not the Worst Year. Widow's Journey. And this isn't a how to grieve book. It's a book about the first year after John died, my husband of 42 years, who I'd spent 44 years with, loving and laughing and living with. And I had the honor and the privilege to hold his hand and be with him when he took his final breath. Now I can say that, and at the time, I don't think those would have been the words I would have used, because it was the most gut-wrenching, anguish-filled moment of my entire life. And how could I write a book that says it was the hardest, not the worst year? How is that possible? I can honestly say there's things in my life that have been really hard. Maybe things that I said in the moment were the worst things. But honestly, the death of my husband was the worst moment of my life. But the year that I walked through, although very, very painful, heartbreaking, lonely, devastating, was a year where I learned so much about myself. I did things I never would have done, and it's not because my husband would have held me back from doing them, but the life experience brought me to these things. And if my husband was still alive, I wouldn't have had the life experience to lead me into the things that it led me to. It led me to a greater understanding of what happened to me and how I became who I was, and a person who really believed that I was very authentic, only to find out that I had been wearing these masks and doing everything I could to fit in, the people pleaser in me. And once I experienced the devastating loss of my husband, John, what grief does is it peels back all the layers. It leaves you naked, broken, and vulnerable. And some of us, and I did this for many years, stuff down the pain because we're told we're not supposed to feel bad, that we're not supposed to make other people uncomfortable. And I did that for years. I stuffed my life down. I numbed my pain as well as numbing my joy because your brain doesn't know what feelings to numb. So it just numbs your whole feelings, all your life. And John's death did not, the grief from that did not allow me to stuff it down. I could not stuff it down. I couldn't pretend. And when I talk about it, I cannot pretend the pain is real. Um, and, we say it ebbs and flows. It does ebb and flow. As I said, I'm 3 years into this journey, and the reality is it's so very painful still, but it's also so very beautiful. So why did I call it the hardest, not the worst year? Because of the things that I learned about myself and the things I chose to learn to do. I chose to learn everything I could about death and dying because it wasn't a conversation that I had ever had before about how people die if they are ill and you have the honor to be able to walk with them, what you will see. And each death, like each birth, is unique, but there are markers. There are things that can be very similar and can help you as a caregiver in the journey walking with someone who is dying. These are things I did not have. My children didn't have. We walked blindly. And when I look back at those days, we loved him fully and completely, and we honored him. We did the best with what we had. I made mistakes. I made choices that hurt people. And you don't know better till you know better. But here's something I want to tell you. Dying people don't have a lot of capacity. Their bandwidth narrows as they're getting close to end of life. So it's really important that we don't make decisions for them, that you have the conversation about what they want and what they need, and what they will accept and what they will not accept. And you, as the caregiver, need to honor that to the best of your ability. And we didn't have those conversations. But John was, for the most part, the leader in the journey. I just, at one point, made a decision. And if you read my book, it's in chapter 8, and you will see what I did there. And one of the things I say, because I had the best intentions, is that the road to hell is paved with good intentions. It's really important to keep the person who is at the end of life informed of everything that's happening, to not surprise them. And that's something that I learned. Don't break their trust. But after he died, I became an end of life doula. I took 3 separate programs throughout that year, and they do tell you don't start right away. Well, I waited until June, so it was 5 months. It was hard, but I learned so much. And then I took another end of life doula program by a man whose book I'd read for the first program that I took. And, they share videos with you. And the last end of life doula program I took was with Martha Jo Atkins' death school. Now, each program I took and became certified in was better. And Martha's I took in the second year, the very, very early days of the second year. And it was profound. And in that time, that's when I was writing my book. So all this to say is everything that happened to me in that year brought me to this beautiful little retreat in Oyosoos BC called Build Your Brave, where I got to speak, and my heart is to speak publicly, become a keynote speaker, and share my story, but also share hope and the honesty that comes with grief, the honesty of death and dying, not to preach, but to inform and to give people some knowledge, because knowledge is powerful. I cannot take away the pain, but when we understand something a little bit better, we're not as afraid. And I was terrified. I can look back now at that moment in time where my husband, John, was dying, and I can see that it, in the moment, because I didn't know what was happening, how very terrifying and it's so scary it was. It looked like it was painful. It looked just awful. But I now know that it wasn't painful. He had the medication he needed, and he wasn't alone. He was going towards someone that he could see that loved him. Because you know what? 98% of the people who are at end of life have visions. These are not hallucinations. They're visions of people who they love, and sometimes people who they don't even know, who will be at their end of their bedside, or they can be up in a corner. They could be often looking up and reaching. John was talking to people. He was packing. He was getting ready to go. I didn't know what was happening. I thought something was happening with his mind. And I never asked him any questions, and I wish I had known. So if you're ever sitting with a dying person and they're looking into the corner and they're reaching, or they look like they're packing, or they're saying some things about they're going home and they can see this beautiful wooded area and there's a gate and they're walking through, ask them where they are and who they see. Don't tell them, no, that's not real. Listen to what they're saying, because you will find out that they're meeting with people that love them. Some people see Jesus. Some people see strangers. As an end-of-life doula, John visited one of my patients who didn't even know him, but they told me he was at the end of the bed and that he was there and he was going to help guide them along with their family and loved ones. He made them feel safe. It was a beautiful exchange. So, Oyosoos brought me to public speaking. Although a small section, a small part, it also brought me to meeting some amazing women who each have a story of loss. Maybe not the loss of a loved one, maybe the loss of a business or a relationship, but women who had experienced devastating loss that brought them to grief. And we had open, honest conversations. And isn't it about time we all had open, honest conversations? Grief is not something to hide. It is our last expression of love. And love is powerful. And love lives on, even when a body dies. I send you love today. Your grief is a reflection of the love you hold for the person, place, or thing that you've lost.